SafeQuest Solano. He works closely with survivors of sexual assault, as well as other traumas and victimization, such as domestic violence, elder abuse, and teen dating violence. He has a communications degree from UC Davis, California, and has worked primarily with youth with mental and behavioral health issues. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Cole Hall.
Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Good afternoon. How's everybody feeling?
Great.
Good.
We're still awake?
Yeah.
Yes. The good news is this is the last presentation of the evening, so there you go. Before I jump into it, I would definitely like to take this time to thank Kimberly, Julie, and Grace, and the rest of Touro University for putting together this amazing event. So give them a hand. I would also like to say, I'm talking about trauma and how it affects the brain, and some of you guys may be familiar with some of the information that I'll talk about today. So please just hang in there, bear with me if we get to a point in the presentation where you're already familiar with the material, okay? Lastly, this isn't the end all, be all. There's a ton of research around this topic. Don't shoot the messenger. This is just one of the ways in which it happens, right? Most of us experience it this way. Just putting it out there, right? Now, who am I? My name is Earl Holly. I work with a nonprofit agency that deals with domestic violence and sexual assault, SafeQuest Solano. And a big part of my job is to go out in the community, high schools, middle schools, elementary schools, colleges, and talk about sexual violence and how we can prevent it. I deal with mostly the youth population. Now, I'm going to ask you to use your imagination just a minute. And I want you to imagine being the first person in your entire family to ever go to college. And on your first day, as you stand in the middle of the campus, taking it all in, you're in awe of what you've accomplished. You've broken the family curse, and you're finally where you've always wanted to be. And as you stand there, you reflect on how desperately you wanted it and how hard you had to fight to get there. You see, for you, this isn't just an ordinary college. This is the college of your dreams, the one you've literally dreamt about every night for the past 3 years, ever since that college field trip when you first laid eyes on it and instantly fell in love. You think back to the day you received your letter of acceptance and how much of a panic you were in out of fear of opening it and reading some disappointing news. So instead, you called over a friend to have her do it for you. So as she stands there, closely beside you, holding the unopened envelope between a pair of unsteady hands because she's nervous too. You remember the sound of her fingers ripping open the envelope and pulling out the piece of paper contained within. You remember the sound of her voice as she read the letters across the top. It read, "Congratulations." And because your body became so overcome with joy and excitement, you nearly had a heart attack anyway. You remember sprinting back to your parents' door, busting open the door, and standing at the threshold and announcing your accomplishment to your parents and to your siblings. The house instantly became filled with love, laughter, joy, and excitement. And of course, your parents couldn't just keep all this goodness to themselves. So naturally, they call your grandparents and tell them the good news. They call your aunt and tell her the good news. They call your uncles and tell them, and before you know it, your entire family is at your house celebrating your accomplishment, making toast in honor of you. So there you are, on the campus of your dreams. Only this time, it's not a dream. This is your reality. You're finally a college student. You can taste it. You can feel it. You belong. And you're on a mission to being the first college graduate in your entire family. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but there's one tiny but significant detail that the dean neglected to disclose to you on your letter of acceptance. A detail so profound that it could potentially change your entire college career and the rest of your life. And that is the ratio 1 in 5. Research says that 1 in 5 college females will experience sexual assault while in college. Not only that, but the dean somehow neglected to let you know that just last semester, there were 20 reports of sexual assault. So there you are, on the campus of your dreams, happy to be where you are. You are not aware of the statistics. And unfortunately, these numbers only reflect what's been reported. 90% of sexual assaults on college campuses are unreported. So the chances of you being raped are even higher than we suspect. I'm just a person who firmly believes that all survivors have the innate ability to bounce back. Not only do they have the ability, but they have the right. We owe them the opportunity, the chance to be something other than a victim, something other than their trauma. They deserve to be seen as a person with potential, a person who is capable, a person who is resilient. Sexual assaults don't just occur on our college campuses. It's happening in our workplaces, it's happening in our communities, and it's happening in our homes. Research says those who are impacted most are adolescents. We have to keep in mind, when we're talking about adolescence, that this is a complicated, often chaotic time in our lives that's critical to human development. So it's up to us to provide our young people with all the support that they need to transition to adulthood. This is also a time where we're most vulnerable to sexual violence. The majority of those affected by sexual assault are between the ages 12 and 24. So again, we have to provide a solid framework of support, one in which our adolescents can explore, grow, thrive, and become resilient. But in order to do that, we must first understand the important relationship between trauma and the adolescent mind. Also, we're going to talk about survivors' resilience and how by adopting a trauma-informed care approach, we can help our survivors be more resilient. Got that?
Yep.
Good to go? All right. Question. When you hear the word trauma, what comes to mind? Any volunteers?
Injury.
Injury. Anything else? Okay.
Fear.
Fear.
Pain.
Fear, pain, injury. So, trauma is essentially driven by two emotions. Fear being one of them, and stress. Trauma is defined as a psychological, emotional response to a highly distressing or disturbing event. That can include, and oftentimes it does, any and everything. It's a subjective experience, right? So what may not be traumatic for me may very well be traumatic for you. And what are some examples of a traumatic event?
Rape,
which we'll talk more about today.
car accident,
Car accidents. Any others? school shootings. These are all traumatic experiences. When we typically think of traumatic experience and trauma, our minds typically go to those that are more severe, like shootings, rape, car accidents. But because this is a subjective experience, it also includes those less severe events. All right? Losing a loved one can be traumatic. Finding out that you have an illness can also be traumatic. A divorce even. These are all traumatic experiences. Okay, so who knows an area of the brain that's impacted during sexual assault? Amygdala. Everybody knows amygdala. Of course. The amygdala. That's a part of the brain that's been highly researched. So there's 3 parts of the brain that we're going to talk about. The first deals with our bodily functions, what they call autonomic responses. Our heart rate, ability to breathe, reflexes, things like that. Now, the limbic system. Pleasure, fear, memory. It includes the amygdala, the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, and the pituitary gland, and other regions as well. Last but not least is the prefrontal cortex. This is the logical part of the brain. It's responsible for speech development, our ability to plan ahead, to reason, to make sense of things. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, this is also the last part of the brain to reach full development. Research says it doesn't reach full development until about age 25. So when we look at adolescents who are experiencing sexual assault, with the majority being between the ages 12 and 24, it's going to have huge implications for them, right? You're putting them in a stressful, fearful situation, and they don't have full capacity to think clearly. They don't have access to the logical part of the brain. So this can lead to several antisocial behaviors. This can lead to self-harm, lonely. That's my go-to when I mess up. Lonely. Right. So that's that. So it can have a lot of implications to our young adults and our adolescents when they're experiencing a traumatic event, such as sexual assault, when they don't have a fully developed brain. Right? Or what's the common answer that you get? Any parents here? Okay. So what's the common answer that you get when you ask this child why they did something that was irrational or illogical to you? What is it? Let's go all together.
I don't know.
I don't know. Right? So can you tell me again, why did you try to flush the cat down the toilet? I don't know, right? It's because they really don't know. They don't have full access to that part of the brain, right? Now, in the context of a sexual assault, or any traumatic experience for that matter, the first part of the brain that's going to respond is the amygdala. The amygdala, right? So the amygdala job is to detect fear or any threat to the body. Once it detects fear, it's going to set off an alarm in the brain, and it's going to send signals to the rest of the brain and the body, letting it know what to do. And one of the brain structures that is in communication with during the sexual assault is the brainstem. The brainstem is going to release some hormones, norepinephrine and dopamine, to help the body survive the situation. Another brain structure that is in communication with is the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is going to go to the pituitary gland and say, hey, the amygdala is tripping. He set off the alarm. We have to do something. The pituitary gland is going to say, okay, I got you. It's going to go down to the adrenal gland, which sits on top of our kidneys, and say, listen, adrenal, hypothalamus just told me that the amygdala set off the alarm. We have to do something. It's time to go into survival mode. The adrenal gland, okay. I'll figure it out, right? So in most cases, the adrenal gland is going to release 4 chemicals. Catecholamines, cortisol, opiates, and oxytocin. So the catecholamines is what's going to help us with the fight or flight response. It's the adrenaline, right? In conjunction with that, we have cortisol. These tools are going to help us determine how much energy we have in the body to either fight the situation or to flee. Then we have opiates and oxytocin. These two are going to work together to help mitigate the pain that we feel so that we can focus on surviving the event, right? And in some instances, you may find a survivor who may laugh during an assault, giggle, smile. That's because she might have high levels of oxytocin. That promotes the good feelings, right? So there you have it. The hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the adrenal gland. This is known as the HPA axis. So it's active. You have the amygdala firing off, full survival mode. HPA axis is kicking in. Now the body is in full survival mode. Now when we enter survival mode, all the parts of the brain that's not included with helping the body survive, unfortunately it shuts down. And unfortunately for us in adolescence, this includes the prefrontal cortex. You don't have access to that part of the brain, so it's often that you hear a survivor say, I couldn't think clearly. I didn't know what to do, right? Because they didn't have full capacity to their prefrontal cortex so they could think through and plan ahead and figure something out, in most cases. So now you have your survival mode. What are the 3 survival responses?
Freeze.
Okay. So we got fight, right. And what was the last one?
Freeze.
Oh, you guys know something, huh? So there's a 4th one in some situations. Bonus point. Don't get quiet now. Don't get quiet now.
Submit.
It's submit or surrender. So, how many times have you heard a victim or survivor say, I didn't know what to do, I just froze up? Raise show of hands if you've heard this statement before. This is due to the flood of hormones that is going through the brain and the body. Oftentimes, this causes the body to shut down and freeze. This is known as tonic immobility, also known as rape-induced paralysis. This is experienced by more than 50% of survivors, mostly adolescents, and mostly for those who've experienced multiple sexual assaults. Right? So, let's see the amygdala in action. So, let's say you guys are at the movie theater. You're watching a scary movie. Halloween. Right? You got your popcorn, your soda, your brain stem is there keeping your blood flowing, your heart rate up, you're able to breathe, largely due to the brain stem. Then your limbic system is allowing you to enjoy that popcorn, the sip of soda, and then you're using your prefrontal cortex to think, do I have enough time to go to the bathroom before my friends get here? Right? So there you are. You're on the edge of your seat. You hear the score, the music in the background. Dum, 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 dum. So you're anticipating something, right? Jamie Lee Curtis, she enters the frame. Dum, 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 dum. She slowly reaches over to the closet door. Dum, 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 dum. She turns it slowly. Everybody's pumped up. And in just that moment, a flood of hormones went through your brain and your body. Right? That's the response. That's the reason for that startled feeling. That's what's happening on the inside. That's the amygdala in action, essentially. That was fun, right? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Yeah, okay. I'm guilty. now let's talk about what happens to the memory when we experience a traumatic event like sexual assault. So we have the hippocampus. Its primary function is to encode, process, and store memory of the event. However, during a sexual assault or traumatic experience, the hippocampus gets the signal from the amygdala as well, saying that it's time to enter survival mode. So instead of storing memories properly, that whole process has now been interrupted. So the hippocampus is now focusing on helping the body survive as well, and it starts pumping more cortisol. Now, we talked about the catecholamines, oxytocin, opiates, other hormones. Now, at normal levels, these hormones helps us. But at high levels, it damages the brain, right? It impairs the brain. Although, depending on the severity of the event, it could lead to permanent damage. But in most cases, it doesn't, right? So, you have these at high levels, it impairs the brain. Although sexual assault is a physical attack on the body, we have to be mindful that the brain receives the brunt of the damage. Okay? More than 50% reported that they thought that they were going to die when they experienced sexual assault. So the brain operates at that level of severity. It feels as if, to the brain at least, that you're being stabbed to death, being shot at. Like it treats it as a near-death experience, right? So this is going to be devastating, especially for our adolescents who have an underdeveloped brain. Fear is at the core of every traumatic experience. Who would like to read that?
Every 98 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted.
What time is it?
3:28.
So for those of you who've been here since 8, right, that's at least more than 300 sexual assaults that occurred just while you were here. That's profound, right? 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually assaulted before their 18th birthday. Research also says that the majority of adolescents, 2/3 of them who are sexually assaulted, are assaulted by people that they know and trust. 1/3 of adult survivors have also experienced sexual assault as an adolescent. Like I said earlier, 90% of college campus sexual assaults are unreported. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men experience some form of sexual violence in their lifetime. Just let those numbers marinate, seep in for a while. And then think about someone who is young and who do not have a fully developed brain and is being sexually assaulted, likely by someone that they know and trust. How would that feel? Devastating, right? A researcher in this field by the name of Dr. Northrup, she describes trauma as an unresolved traumatic event that lives in the energy system of the body. When we talk about our memories of the event, it's embedded in our brains. It lives with us. As survivors, we carry it with us everywhere we go. And this can lead to triggers, because our memory of the event is only bits and pieces of what happened. Mostly sensory fragments. What did you feel, hear, taste, touch? These are the things that are most likely to be recalled later on. But it's not going to be in a sequential, linear order of what happened. Right? Because the brains are scrambled. Now, PTSD is the common mental health symptom that people who experience trauma develop. Adolescents who experience sexual assault are 6.2 times more likely to develop PTSD. 30% of those are depressed, and 33% have contemplated suicide. What happens when you experience a traumatic event like sexual assault, a shift of how the brain operates occurs, and also a shift in identity, right? You see yourself as worthless. You blame yourself. Maybe it was my fault. And we're talking about adolescence. Why would this person that knows me, this person that I love and trust, why would this person mistreat me in such a way to make me feel like an object and worthless? Maybe it's my fault. So we start to self-blame and it's self-hate. So when we're talking about being resilient and being trauma-informed, we have to shift our form of thinking to help them see themselves as a valuable person, because that's who they really are. Now, we've been talking about adolescence and how it affects them, but there's also a ton of underrepresented populations that we don't talk much about. Sexual assault affects all of us. Women, men, kids. No matter your background, social status, sexual assault, it doesn't care. Right? Joe was in prison. And while he was there, he was sexually assaulted multiple times. And he describes in the video how he felt like an object, how he felt like he didn't belong, and how he didn't believe that he had any value. It wasn't until he met an advocate who reached out to him, who sent him a letter and simply asked him, "What is your name?" And in that moment, it brought tears to his eyes. Because for him, he felt like he was finally being recognized as somebody. When we talk about resilience, it's helping them see that they are somebody and they're capable of coming through this situation stronger than ever before. It's the first step in the healing process. Recognizing that I have value and I'm able to overcome this situation. I'm on my journey to heal, right? So, bouncing back, resiliency is always an option. So when we're talking about being trauma-informed, what we're talking about then, it's not what's wrong with you. When you go to the doctor's office, you tell them, I'm having depression, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, all these different things. What do? They prescribe you a medicine, a pill. Here, take this. But these are indicators. So as future healthcare professionals, you should be paying close attention to understand that the root of the problem is trauma. So instead of focusing on treating these patients with medicines and pills, let's change the way we think and focus on helping them build resiliency and helping them heal. Right. So care. C. Choices. Options. When you go to the doctor's office, what's the first thing they tell you to do? Have a seat here, here's a gown, take off your clothes and put on a gown. Whoa. If you're talking to someone who's a survivor of sexual assault, that's not the way you want to talk to them. Give them options, choices. If you want to sit, you can sit. If you feel more comfortable standing, please stand. Here's a gown. If you want to take your clothes off, feel free. If not, we can figure something else out. Right? A, ask permission. Consent is a huge issue for survivors, right? So we have to make sure that we better ask permission. Is it okay if I touch you here? Right? And with that, explain to them what to expect every step of the way. Right? Is it okay if I use my stethoscope to listen to your heart? It's going to be a little cold. Is that okay? Let them know what to expect every step of the way. Or, remind them that it's not their fault. That's critical. Because a lot of self-blame is happening after you experience a sexual assault. So that's important. Let them know that this isn't your fault. Lastly, E. Exclusion is not an option. Include them. If you're talking about being a healthcare professional, you better include them in their health plan. You can make suggestions, you can give your professional opinion, but ultimately, it's up to them to make the decision for themselves. Give them back the power and control that they lost during the sexual assault. Right? That's important. Now, as we wrap up, if you want to be truly trauma-informed, you have to change the way you think. So I'm going to ask you guys to participate in this activity, this exercise. So if you don't mind, can you please stand up? Time to wake up. So, the rules. I'm going to give you a word, and together as a group, you're going to repeat that word. Then afterwards, you're going to repeat the same word 10 more times. Then, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to respond with the first thing that comes to your mind. We got the rules? Yes. All right. The word is white.
White.
White. White. White. White. White. White. White. White. White. White.
What do cows drink? What do cows drink? What do cows drink, ladies and gentlemen? What do cows drink? Cows drink water. That's what I said. So when I did it the second time, there was probably a group of you who were like, he got me the first time, so I'm not going to say anything and just let everybody else say what they're going to say, and I'll just sit back and laugh, right? There was probably another group of you guys who were like, okay, check this out. He got me the first time, so I'm going to take my time to hear what he has to say, think about it, process it, and then respond, right? Then there was probably another group of you guys who were like, I'm just going to be spontaneous and just say whatever comes to mind. So, when we're talking about trauma-informed, we have to be a lot like that second group, right? Because contrary to popular belief, our brains are down. That's just facts, right? It allows us to say things that we really don't mean. Show of hands, if you ever said something and then instantly was like, oh, retract, let me get it back. Right? Didn't mean, right? So when we talk about being trauma-informed, we really have to take the time to think about what's being told to us, think about our responses carefully so that we don't say something that could potentially re-trigger them. Right? In closing, I hope that I was able to provide some insight as to how trauma affects the brain. But as future healthcare professionals, it's ultimately up to you to continue to educate yourselves so that you can truly transform the caregiving process from being treaters to being healers. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'll stick around for questions if you have any.